Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to today's Research Impact Canada webinar on cultivating career readiness, professional development for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. In today's webinar, we'll hear from Dr. Mabel Ho, who's the curriculum developer at Dalhousie University, Lexie Milmine, who's a sociology PhD student at McMaster University, and Joe Minx, who's acting Brightspace developer at Dalhousie University. Today, the three of them are going to discuss the results of a research project from Dalhousie, looking at the gaps needed to address career readiness. Dalhousie's first professional development skill certificate for graduate and postdoc fellows launched at the beginning of this year, and the results of the study helped to inform the development of this program. So today's discussion will focus on the skills needed to promote and ease career transition, as well as learning about this newly launched certificate program, which is a central hub for professional development designed for grad students and postdoc fellows. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to our speakers.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Mabel Ho. I go by she, hers as my pronoun. I want to thank Julia and Connie for this warm invitation. We're excited to talk to you today. Just to let you know, if you have any questions, Julia has kindly been in charge of monitoring the chat, so please put your questions there and we'll answer that at the end. I'm excited to talk to you about this project and introduce my collaborators.
Hi everyone, my name is Lexie. My pronouns are she, her. And as Julia said, I'm a PhD student at McMaster University. I'm joining today from Hamilton, Ontario, where McMaster is located. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the land I occupy today is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. The wampum uses the symbolism of a dish to represent the territory and one spoon to represent that the people are to share the resources of the land and only take what they need.
Hi there, and my name is Joe. I'm a course builder and acting Brightspace developer at Dalhousie, and I'm joining you from Halifax, Nova Scotia today. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that Dalhousie University sits on Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and present, and to consider how we can each, in our own way, try and move forward in a spirit of reconciliation. There we go. So you're probably here because you care about graduate students and postdoctoral career outcomes like we do, which is part of where this project came from in the first place. So this research came out of recognizing that the career trajectories of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows don't always align with the kind of market that universities expect or the ones that universities prepare their graduate students for. This is important, when you consider how many graduate students are coming out of university today. Specifically, for example, the number of PhD graduates per year in Canada has doubled between 2002 and 2017, with not necessarily any major known change in the the kind of academic career prospects for them. The kind of research that we're doing here is being done at universities across the country to track the career progress of their graduate students, with notable institutions being like the University of Toronto, McGill, the University of Alberta, and the University of British Columbia. So our research is really in addition to this important and current ongoing conversation. Most PhD graduates, particularly those that do their degree in North America, following graduation do become employed in higher education, but not necessarily as full-time faculty or tenure-track faculty that their programs often try and prepare them for. The private sector is, unsurprisingly, the second most common employer, but there, you do see some department or field or program-specific trends around this. For example, the humanities and social sciences and business graduates as well do have the highest rates of employment in higher education. Conversely, our STEM students, so these being like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics students, often transition to working in industry and in the private sector. When regarding the skill sets of PhD graduates, there's a lot of uncertainty around the relevancy of skills gained from PhD programs to the wider job market, and a lot of anxiety from PhDs around landing like a good job. Much of literature that looks at addressing this recommends third-party partnerships with government and or industry around developing students directly and academic programs. And regardless of the model, kind of the key takeaway with these is that there is a need for more opportunity for PhD students and really graduate students as a whole to widen their skill set and build professional skills that can help them outside of the narrow traditional academic market. So thus, there comes our project, where the goal here is to inform the design and delivery of a professional development curriculum to graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. But our findings and lessons learned can be applied more broadly to graduate students and postdoctoral fellows as a whole. So what came out of this was the development of the DalGrad Professional Development Certificate Program, which Mabel will touch on a little bit more later on. In doing this, to ensure that the content was timely and relevant for participants, we needed to fill two knowledge gaps addressed with a few questions here. So first, we need a systematic study of the professional development experiences of current graduate students and postdoctoral fellows at Dalhousie University to identify what areas of skills they want to develop. So that came out with our first research question here. What is the professional development landscape at Dalhousie through the experiences of current graduate students and postdoctoral fellows? Second, we lacked an understanding of recent doctoral alumni in the workforce, and in particular, what doctoral students needed in order to be successful in their careers. Thus, our second question, what skills do recent doctoral alumni in the workforce identify as being essential to be successful in their careers? So on our methodology or data more broadly, so our data came from a few sources. So first, we ran a current graduate student and postdoctoral fellow survey, which was launched in February of 2020 and ran for about 6 weeks. We asked questions regarding like the kinds of skills that graduate students and postdoctoral fellows would like to develop and the kind of workshop opportunities they'd like to see on Dalhousie campus. The survey was sent to about 3,600 graduate students and 156 postdoctoral fellows. Response rate was about 11% with a sample size of 404. Majority of responses were from doctoral students at about 32%, followed by master's students in research-based programs at 32%, master's students in professional-based programs at about 29.5%, and finally postdoctoral fellows at about 6.5%. Next, we ran a doctoral alumni survey, and this looked at PhD graduates between 2005 and 2018 and looked at their career paths after graduation, the skills they used in their current occupation, and the skills that were needed to acquire as their careers developed. The alumni survey was initially sent in March 2020, but this was during the start of the pandemic. COVID put a little bit of a wrench in things, so we relaunched the survey in May 2020 and it was live for another 3 weeks. The alumni survey was sent to 1,051 individuals and the response rate was 10% with a sample size of about 101. Majority of our respondents for the alumni survey came from science programs at about 35%, followed by medicine at about 19%, and then the arts, social sciences, engineering, and interdisciplinary studies, each at just shy of 12%, respectively. Both surveys relied on individuals who opted into the Faculty of Graduate Studies e-newsletter in order to get a hold of them. In addition, we ran a social media campaign to raise awareness of our research and our project. And this was primarily advertised on Twitter and Facebook. Both surveys included an official welcome message from the Dean of Graduate Studies, and target participants were sent reminders to participate on a weekly basis. We also ran some interviews. So interviews were with graduate student and postdoctoral fellows who participated in the graduate student survey, where participants were asked to leave an email address if they were interested in being contacted for a follow-up interview. In total, we held about 22 video conferencing interviews that were conducted in May 2020, averaging 52 minutes in length. Of the 22 individuals interviewed, 20 were graduate students and 2 were postdoctoral fellows. All interviews were transcribed and participants chose pseudonyms for confidentiality and privacy reasons.
Our project demonstrates a clear need for and high interest in a professional development skills certificate. The majority of surveyed graduate students and postdoctoral fellows, so about 85%, indicated an interest in obtaining a professional development skills certificate. And as you can see in the chart that's on the slide now, this interest was consistent across all degree levels. Participants also indicated they would be more motivated to register for the certificate if they received a transcript notation, letter of recognition, or LinkedIn recognition, something that helps communicate their skills to future employers. We found that graduate students and postdoctoral fellows were interested in gaining skills that would make them more employable down the line and help them in their future careers. Key skills included communication, project management, and networking skills. This drive to work on professional development is exemplified in this quote from a master's student who we've named Mary. She says, "Certain skills aren't intuitively learned through your master's or your graduate studies, or we don't encounter certain skills. So our programs don't always prepare us for real life or real life careers and real life expectations. It's important that universities find other ways to help. If they want to help students, it's important that they find other ways to reinforce these certain skills." This participant is speaking to the gap we see between the skills students and postdoctoral fellows are looking to develop and those they feel they're actively getting out of their program. In addressing this gap, participants like Mary emphasized a need for cooperation between different levels of the university. With students and postdocs looking to develop both program-specific and more general skills, it's important for departments, faculties, and the university more broadly to address these needs in cooperation. Participants noted several factors they would consider in deciding whether to take a professional development workshop or program. These include timing, cost, relevance, and delivery. They're looking for programs that fit into a busy schedule, are low or no cost, that target skills of interest to them, and that for the most part are offered in person. Of course, that one is an obstacle in our current moment. Dalhousie graduate students and postdoctoral fellows also identified several barriers to participating in professional development workshops, which we can see in this chart. These include not knowing that programs are being offered, timing and scheduling conflicts, and being too busy. Interestingly, in the survey, lack of support from supervisors or committees was not seen as a barrier. This was reported as an obstacle for fewer than 2% of master's respondents, about 2% for PhD respondents, and about 7% for postdoctoral fellows. In contrast, during interviews, participants specifically mentioned discouragement from supervisors, faculty, or departments to engage in professional development as a barrier to participating. Additionally, the interviews also highlighted a perception that current workshops were too generic, suggesting the need to offer different levels of training like beginner and advanced. We see that graduate students and postdoctoral fellows are eager to learn and willing to commit some time to developing professional development skills. Participants highlighted a lack of awareness about professional development that might be available at the university. Some participants describe going outside of the university to seek learning opportunities and mentorship on their own. They also want to ensure that if they invest their time into professional development endeavors, that it will be worth their while. They want to see a change in their skill or knowledge level as a result of these programs. For example, this might look like a CV or resume building workshop where participants come with a current resume and leave with an improved version, or a networking workshop that's followed by a job fair or some other kind of event where they have an opportunity to practice the skills that they've gained. Similarly, when we asked participants what their ideal professional development program would look like, many described a choose your own adventure kind of program. They want to be able to work on the skills that are important for them and to customize their certificate to maximize the benefits.
So a major theme that came up in our research and really that guided the development of the DalGradPD program was this notion of the awareness of an uncertain job market. And it's kind of exemplified in this quote here by Travis, one of the postdoctoral fellows that we interviewed, where he stated, quote, "We all know that the academic job market is not stable. The availability of well-paid permanent jobs in just about every field is not great at the moment. So that's an overriding concern." So in our interviews, many students and postdoctorals stated that they knew about the state of the job market and wanted to do more to gain new skills, but didn't always know where to go or how to begin. However, generally they felt that, professional development workshops was, kind of that safe bet and would be the option that would, kind of best improve their chances of getting a job later on. This uncertain, job market wasn't anything new. This was something that came up in our survey research on doctoral alumni when getting participants to kind of look back on where they were when they were graduating and entering the labor market, and looking at their confidence in finding work. In this graph here, you can see that a large majority of them weren't too confident in where they were going to go after graduation. And even if a majority of them did end up going on to working in higher education shortly after finishing their degrees, it was still an overriding concern for them at that time. When looking at the skills specifically that our alumni reported gaining during their education, it was very interesting to look at, for example, the top 5 skills here. On the graph, you'll see, research skills, critical thinking skills, writing skills, presentation skills, communication skills. All these, very important when doing work in research and knowledge translation and, communicating your research. But then, comparing that to the kinds of skills that they utilize in their current occupation, there was a bit of overlap between the first 5, for example. On the right, you'll see, communication, critical thinking, writing, presentation skills, teamwork skills. Small change, but for the most part, fairly static, which isn't too unsurprising if many of these people did go into working in higher education. What is interesting, though, is when you look at the disparity between those that weren't really emphasized in their degrees. This kind of goes back to our research question around the kinds of skills that were important for students. There may be a lot of overlap in the core skills that their degrees give them, but shows that there are a lot of other skills that can be as equally necessary that are underdeveloped. For example, like project management skills, leadership skills, and alarmingly even teamwork skills, which is in the top 5 on the right. These were all, top 5 on the right, and one of the lowest ranked ones, on the left. These were all, underdeveloped in their education as compared to where they were in their occupation. And interestingly enough, these are also exactly the kinds of skills that our current graduate students reporting wanting to develop in their professional development. So it shows the importance of expanding and exploring more and wider options. When regarding career paths and options for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows, one finding was the need to bridge the gap between academia and the public and private sector. And you'll see that in this quote here that came up in our graduate student postdoctoral fellows survey, where one respondent said, "I think there needs to be clusters which are oriented towards different career paths, specifically academia, government, private industry." So why is this important? Again, this goes back to how universities, are preparing their graduate students for jobs and in research and in academia, despite these not necessarily being the ones that students want or even really able to get. It's clear that students want to know what their options are in graduating besides this route into academia that they feel their programs really emphasize. You see that in this next quote here as well that came up in the alumni survey. One participant said, more information relating to the various career paths available for PhD graduates. Knowing the various pros and cons of each career path would have made decision about future paths easier. So all this highlight themes around access to more options in training and opportunity, and even more with mentors that Lexie mentioned a little bit earlier, not just in the narrow kind of academic supervisor that graduate students generally have. And also this need for career exploration. It was really a reoccurring theme of career diversity.
Thank you. So what does this all mean? So taking together with the literature that you just heard about professional development, what our current graduate students and postdoctoral fellows have been saying, what our alumni have been saying, we created the DalGradPD Framework. And here we're really focusing on 4 pillars, and it's dedicating to building skills in communication. So this is like talking about their work to multiple audience, and importantly now, especially in the climate that we're in, and obviously even before that, about intercultural communication. The second theme or pillar is the idea of career intelligence. So this is around career exploration and unpacking the job market. The third theme is health and well-being. So this is the foundational importance to personal and professional success for individuals to achieve their full potential. And lastly, the theme around leadership. So as we work in an interconnected world, knowing how to work with others and how to manage projects. So in thinking about this framework, it was really important for us to think about how these skills and competencies are essential in multiple careers. It wasn't just one, but multiple careers that people might decide on in the future. So how does this bring back to what our survey talked about? In the postdoctoral and in the current graduate students and postdoctoral fellows survey, what we did was that we listed a bunch of different workshops that people might be interested in. And then now we cluster it based on these themes: career intelligence, health and well-being, leadership, and communication. From what you've been listening, it won't be a surprise that career intelligence was the most popular. So this is around like hearing about what their different career opportunities are out there. And one concrete example will be having panel discussions with alumni. The second big cluster is around communication and leadership. So communication around talking to the non-academic world, and also leadership around learning about more about project management, entrepreneurship, and social innovation. Oh, I want to highlight health and well-being. Even though in the survey, it seems that this is very low, in all the interviews that has been done, all 22, this has been a top priority. In addition, in all the current workshops that I've been facilitating, health and well-being has been the #1 top priority and pressing concern. Everyone talks about this, so I think it's really interesting to think about what people say in the surveys and what is actually happening and where is this coming from. So really thinking about health and well-being as being foundational. In thinking about this recurring theme of career diversity, I will also want to acknowledge the shift, this cultural shift. And more importantly, a cultural change. And here I want to highlight 2 quotes, one found in the graduate student and postdoctoral fellow survey and another from the alumni survey. So first, programs that support the inclusion of professional development within or complementary to our degree programs is a very smart idea and will allow the university to produce graduates who are prepared to start their careers no matter which career path they choose. The second one from our alumni says, we need to create an environment that those with doctoral degrees working in non-academic positions are just as valuable as those in the academic setting. For both of these, we're hearing the voices of the individuals highlighting the need to cultivate career readiness, but also promote a cultural shift that acknowledges and celebrates the diverse paths that a career education can enable individuals to do. So let's bring this all together in thinking about what are we doing for the DalGradPD. So how do we launch it and what does it look like? So first, in launching it, I want to highlight and give huge acknowledgements to the Faculty of Graduate Studies communications team, especially Andrew Riley, who is the Senior Manager of the Strategy and Communication, and Ken Conrad, who is the Communication Coordinator. So as you remember, one of the things we noted in the beginning of the presentation that Lexie said, individuals talked about not knowing about these events. So the first thing that they did was having a DAO news story. So like starting to get people's attention, getting excited about this program. Second, later on in January of 2021, our Dean, Marty Leonard, had invited graduate students and postdoctoral fellows about why it's important to do PD and inviting them to this new program and how we are there, the whole university is there to support them. And lastly, this information was passed on to the faculty and staff. So everyone is having different types of knowledge, having the same knowledge about what is going on. So this is our new website. It's a central hub, and the workshops that are listed are exclusively meant for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. So going back to what we heard in our surveys and our interviews, how they wanted something that's specifically tailored and targeted to them. We also have all these workshops that are listed are free. What's really exciting to think about that was like 4 weeks prior to this website being launched and 4 weeks afterwards, we saw an increase of over like 1,000%. Like that is how many unique views are being going to this website. And in creating this program, we intentionally wanted it to be flexible, accessible, and collaborative. So what does that mean is that we actually are trying to work with different departments and programs to make sure that it is not something that's an additive thing that individuals are doing, but actually complements what they're doing. And I'll be happy to talk about what that looks like later on in your Q&A. In addition, there's a certificate option. We recognize that not everyone would be doing the certificate option, but having this there, that people could have recognition of the work that they're doing, and it will be on their transcript, and they'll get a certificate signed by the Dean of Faculty of Graduate Studies. So this is what our Brightspace page looks like. And for the certificate, there are 3 main things that are aimed for the certificate. First, we want individuals to explicitly articulate the skills gained in their studies, cultivate professional skills, and ease career transitions. Second, we want to allow individuals to learn the process of developing intentional career mapping plans and create actionable strategies directed to future goals. And lastly, we want individuals to start thinking about themselves as lifelong learners. So including the importance of practicing personal reflection to gain awareness of skills transferability and their own strengths and where their future growth will be. So you're probably wondering what this program looks like. It's really 4 major components. The first step is creating an individualized development plan. And here people are really honing in on what their goals are and where they want to go next. What Lexie was saying at the beginning about like choose your own adventure, which is what's really great about the individualized development plan is that it goes back to the person and how are they defining personal success and goals. What happens is that they go to a workshop, and the assessment piece is they write a reflection, like what are their individual development plan going forward. So that's the first component. The second component is for individuals to do 8 hours, 8 hours total, 2 hours for each pillar. So the 4 pillars we talked about, communication, career intelligence, health and well-being, and leadership. So 4 times 2 is 8. And these ones, after finishing them, they do a reflection activity to write about what they learned. What's the point? The next part is experiential learning. It's one part to actually learn about the skills. It's another part to actually engage with it. So 16 hours, 4 times 4 for each of the pillars. So for example, it's one thing to learn about like a time management technique. It's another thing to actually practice it. It's one thing to learn about you're supposed to do networking. It's another to actually go to a networking event and have all these nerves playing with you when you're talking to potential strangers, right? And becoming new connections. After they do this type of experiential learning, they're going to write a portfolio. Lastly, how does this all wrap up together, right? Like how does doing all these different experiences, what is your story going forward? So thinking about your professional identity going forward, and how do you articulate the skills that you gained and where do you want to go next? So thinking about where you started, where you're now, and where you're going next. So this is the last workshop that individuals do, and then they write a reflection afterwards. So this is the program that we look at and really highlighting that it is collaborative and it's not additive to whatever they're doing. So I want to conclude with one of words from our participant. They said, "What a great idea. I struggle to keep track of the PD options all over campus. Thankful this has been created to streamline all options for us." I want to show you some of the graphics that has been created to show that there is a very clear identity around what is happening that allows people to have that recognition. And in the end, we're working towards growing with our campus partners. I really want to highlight our campus partners. They've been fantastic to do workshops that are specifically for graduate students and also our external providers. And as we grow and work towards supporting individuals' personal and professional goals. Julia is here, and I want to have that recognition that this research would not have been possible without their support. So the Conference Board of Canada through the Government of Canada's Future Skills Centre. Future Skills is in partnership with the Dalhousie University, Conference Board of Canada, and Blueprint. And I welcome any of your questions. My name is Mabel. You could feel free to email me if you have any questions. And I open the floor up to everyone here.
Thank you, Mabel, Joe, Lexie. That was a really fabulous presentation and really great to learn about, you know, how these results of the study have really translated into the formation of this really what seems like a beneficial program. So I know we had some questions in the chat box, so I'll ask for anybody that has questions to please unmute yourself. And we have about 25 minutes left for questions. I can also talk at one of the questions that came through the chat box was, what about alumni? Were they also interested in this certification?
Thank you, Julia. Hi, Jennifer. Alumni didn't actually explicitly articulate interest in the certificate, but they definitely articulated wanting some form of skills, understanding of what they could do. Even though, as Joe mentioned, a number of them are in higher ed, they did recognize, like, I wish I knew more of what was happening, what skills were involved, where we could go next. There was that uncertainty of where they want to go because of the career transition afterwards.
I see I'm being prompted to unmute myself. Hello.
Hi.
I had all the questions.
Oh, I'm going through the list. Gamification. For the first question, the lovely thing about this is that you still get emails. Making more exciting. From the survey, it was clear that people wanted something tangible out of it, like a certificate, a notation, something, and it made them more interested in participating. I think we know across Canada, especially, not everyone will be doing the whole certificate. So that is why there was always options for people. This is an option that they could do, make it more enticing, make it more rewarding, but recognizing that a lot of individuals would be focusing on doing the workshops.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
And then, sorry, I'm just like following down your questions. Go ahead, Lexie.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to add on to what Mabel was saying about, you know, where the certificate came from. Besides having something tangible for students to know themselves that they had gained those skills, one thing that we found in interviews was participants weren't sure how to communicate the skills of their PhD or their master's or whatever they had gained from to employers. And so this kind of helps to give them something concrete to say, you know, these are the exact workshops that I did, this is where I got those skills, and I did these reflection exercises to be able to communicate that as well.
I actually thought it was an interesting, I'm going by your list, Jennifer, your question about whether or not they had a positive experience. Some of them were quite honest in saying that they didn't really have a good experience, and this is why they want these changes to happen. Like the McGill work, we saw that a number of them were in higher ed, so that's why the idea of like making a broader cultural shift is really important, so people are more comfortable with answering surveys that might not be thinking that we only are thinking of one route. Joy and Lexie, do you want to add anything?
This is Jen. I noticed, I think one of the comments that you got from a survey participant talked about getting alumni engaged, or at least alluded to it. And I'm curious, it doesn't sound like necessarily alumni are part of, you can't make people that have already graduated do stuff for free, but I'm curious, are there programs on campus that would encourage alumni participation in departments or even individual courses? Because we just disappear as a problem.
Yeah, I'm currently working with the alumni office to bring people back in and see what we can do. Interesting enough, when alumni does some of their reporting and surveys, one of the things, well, at Dalhousie, I can't speak for all universities, they did notice that people who were, what the alumni want is some kind of meaningful engagement and experience with current students, right? So now we're trying to think about how can we make that happen. And what's funny about like doing this all in this virtual, now we're like new ways of doing that.
Yeah, it's great.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
And you just had another question posted in the chat box asking, is this program available to students outside of Dalhousie?
That's a great question, Kaylee. It's a discussion with, well, especially for the Atlantic provinces, talking with the deans to see what their thought process is about how the sharing of the resources, workshops, et cetera, et cetera. Currently, it's really only focused for DAP. You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? Feel free to post them in the chat or Q&A box, or to nudge me to unmute you.
This is Jen. I'm curious about the experiential learning component, the 4 hours for each chunk. What does that actually look like, you know, actually using the skills? Can you give me an example of that?
That's a great question, Jennifer. So one of the things that people were talking about in the surveys and interviews were like, it would be really great to actually do something after learning about networking skills. So like, how do we plan our programming that people could learn about networking skills and then actually apply that? So for example, that's one example, like experiential learning would be like going to a networking event and trying that out. For communication, it might be writing a blog or writing for the conversation or some kind of outreach. So giving people that idea of what they can go, where they want to go next, and try out these things. I think some of your work, you have talked about how people need to go out and see different things and like articulate what these things mean, and like going outside the university, trying it. Does that? Oh.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's interesting. I can imagine that those experiences, you might develop new and different ones, and those might involve partners in various places on and off campus.
Exactly, and to open people's possibilities of what's out there, right? Instead of always just in one realm.
It reminds me of the Intersect job simulations project. Yeah, you know, okay, cool.
Yeah, totally. And also the Imagine PhD with all the different like job companies and families.
Yeah.
I see Tracy's here, and she is one of our partners too, from the ocean.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Mabel, a little bit about the partnership piece. How was it bringing partners on board, and how much did you involve them in kind of informing the development of the certificate program? Was it like a very collaborative approach, or did you find that they were willing to and interested in helping you with the development of it?
That's a great question, Julia. It was really, Dalhousie has a really great programming. A lot of things, what happens is that it's really focused on the undergraduate level, which I'm sure happens across different various Canadian universities, not just in Canada, but elsewhere. So when I approached them about the certificate option in this framework, most of them, actually all of them, have been so kind and be like, yeah, we'll be happy to do some targeted specific workshops for graduate students for you. So, and now we have a committee. We meet once a month and we talk about like what's going on, what are our pressing concerns, and to start being more intentional about thinking about in the future how we could plan some events, like maybe a week of whatever idea. It's planning right now has been a little bit difficult, as I'm sure you all could imagine, not knowing what's going to happen in the fall, but we are having this like great conversations about what we can do to support our graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. So I thank you, Jennifer, for the question. How about I'll let Joe and Lexie answer that as well. So I don't know who Joe or Lexie wants to go first. So the question is, what did you find most surprising in your research?
I can start. So one thing that really kind of stands out to me was that point that Mabel really emphasized earlier around like the surveyed how underrepresented health and well-being was in our survey data as compared to how important it really does seem to be to students kind of in practicality. And I think maybe part of that comes from students not necessarily understanding what health and well-being means, whether that means just, you know, going to see a therapist. Maybe that's kind of how they perceive it. But then when it talks, when we start talking about like, what are the things that what are the skills you want to be able to do? What's important to you? They all start expressing, you know, things like, you know, effective time management and having a healthy work-life balance. And these are exactly the kinds of things that fall under that. And I think for many academics anyways, that's probably something that they run into. You know, many of them, their work is their life, and maybe they don't have that healthy balance, or maybe not as much as that they would like. And something that you experience even as a graduate student. I know I can't speak for Lexie, but I can know for myself, you know, my work and my research was my life for a few years, and I didn't have that balance, and you know, I kind of didn't appreciate it until I was able to kind of get it back. So yeah, I think that was really the surprising thing, was just how important it actually is, and how maybe underappreciated it is.
Yeah, I love that question. And I was surprised by that too, Joe. I mean, as a grad student myself, I was a grad student when I was taking it, I'm a grad student now, and I find that a lot of the things we found specifically in interviews made so much sense to me. I found myself agreeing so much with participants as we were interviewing them. And there was a lot to relate to there. One thing that did surprise me was when interviewees described a lot of differences in access to professional development across fields or across departments. And so we interviewed people from all across different programs in STEM and social sciences and humanities, and in professional programs as well. And the different access that they had provided to them by their faculties or their departments in professional development was just so different. And so some people, you know, they had access to, you know, their department would pay for them to go to different conferences and things like that. And other people had next to nothing, or they just had no way to find out about it. So I think, you know, that brings us into the certificate being this fantastic thing. Now, maybe I'm biased, but having all of that information for everyone at the university level in one place. So we all know what we have access to, and we all have similar access. So even if your department itself doesn't have that to give to you, the university does, which I think is great.
I echo what Lexie and Joe both said. I'm going to answer your last question about postdocs are able to access. Yes, so postdocs are doing this. They also have the possibility of doing this. The postdocs here, they're doing something really fantastic. They're doing Postdoctoral Association Society, where they meet once a month, where we do specifically professional development that they have desired and want, noticing what they want next. So understanding there is a difference of their needs.
And I have one more question. I was going to ask, have you thought about, is there a plan in place for how you'll evaluate like the effectiveness and success of your program?
Yes, so everyone who registers for the certificate option has a quick survey. I feel like every time we say quick, it's like around 5 minutes, where they do a bit of self-recognition of their skills, of where they're at and where they want, where they're at more or less. And at the end, we also ask similar questions. No one has finished the certificate yet. We only launched in January. But we do have plans that once they're finished, a year after interviewing them, mainly because a lot of times the research has shown, like sometimes it takes a while to have all these actually be embodied and to apply it. So there is a plan involved for the evaluation of this.
That's great, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions? I was just going to say thank you to our wonderful speakers, Mabel, Joe, Lexie. Really appreciate your time, and you know, I think this is a great avenue to disseminate some of this really great work that you've done. So thank you for that. Today's webinar has been recorded, and in the next week or so on the Research Impact Canada, we'll post this recording as well as a copy of the slides. And if you have any other questions specific to the webinar, feel free to email me and I can direct you to these wonderful speakers today. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.